And I've entitled this morning, Love of Mom, Love of God. I'd like to read to you a little bit of what I read off from Focus on the Family's webpage last night. It kind of caught my attention. It's called The Power of a Mother's Love by Jill Savage. Mother love shapes cultures and individuals. While most mothers know that their love and emotional availability are vital to their children's well-being, many of us do not understand the profound and long-lasting impact we have in developing our young children's brains, teaching them first lessons of love and shaping their consciences. And before I finish, I'd like to show you a few pictures of a mom's love. I like that. I just like that.
Long live the Queen.
What do you think of when you think of mom? Continue. Mothers need to be willing to look inside their own experiences to identify any places they may still be affected by our relationship with their own mother. They can begin that journey by simply being willing to search their heart and better understand themselves. Professional counseling may also be a valuable part of that process. Laura Ingalls Wilder said, "What is there in the attitude of your children toward yourself that you wished were different? Search your own heart and learn your ways toward your own mother could be improved." This is important whether your mother is still living or not. We are deeply affected by our relationship with our mother, and one of the most powerful gifts we can give to our children is our own emotional health. A child should never feel as if they need to earn a mother's love. A mother's love needs to be given unconditionally to establish trust and a firm foundation of emotional intimacy in a child's life. If love is withheld, a child will look for it in a million other ways, sometimes through their lifetime, unless they come to a sort of peace with their past. The emotional foundation we give our children at home is foundational to their life. We cannot underestimate the value of home and the power of a mother's love. So when you think of a mother's love and you reflect on those pictures, what do you think of? Caring, nurturing, nourishing, teaching, protective, empathetic, forgiving, accepting. It's a tall order for a person to fulfill. Moms seem to do it best, typically. Proverbs 31, 27, 28 says this, "She looks well into the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her." What's the love of a mom like? You know, and I like to read what's out there, and I found like lots of websites with pictures like that and descriptions of moms and tributes to moms, and you begin to read the stories and you well up in tears of how this mom handled this scenario and this mom handled that scenario. And while I was searching, you know, you see that, and then I ran across another website. I'm not going to believe the name of it. Scary Mommy. Yeah. When I was a little boy, I mean, don't hold this against me, and I'm not losing my man guard over this one, okay? When I was a real little boy, I'm talking like 2 or 3, okay? It's acceptable. My mom used to put those, you know, face masks on. You know, those. Hers had this light green tint. Oh, it freaked me out. It did. It freaked me out. I would cry and run and scream. That is not my mom. That's not what Scary Mommy was talking about. Our mom's perfect. You know, mom all live in this fallen world. We all have been wounded. We all have been hurt. And many times as we have received hurt, we continue a cycle as it plays out in our own kids' lives. Does anybody know what I'm talking about this morning? And I love the invitation in what she wrote, and that if you would take the time to look deep within, to consider the relationship with your own mom, and you want to know something, a lot to be thankful for. Wonderful things. I'm so glad my mom had kids. But I remember I have such good memories about many things. But guess what? They weren't all perfect. And yours probably aren't either. And to take that introspective look and say, what am I carrying? And why am I carrying it? You know, the biggest thing that happens when a mom gets scared, and I'm just going to touch on this because then we're going to shift it back, okay, is shame. I've read a lot of books over the last 2 years. And one I'm reading right now is called The Soul of Shame. And it's amazing the devastating effects of shame and how shame comes into our life. It's the common thing that all of us who have had imperfect parents, all the way from a little bit to severe abuse, carry. Every single one of us. I can give you 3 stories as I've been reading some of these out of a couple of different books. There's this one guy named Ethan, and they always use different terms, so don't worry, different names, don't worry. It's a fake name for a real person. And he was raised in a good Christian home. A good Christian home. But father, maybe not so many outbursts of anger, but there was always this dissatisfaction of how he didn't do things right. He did that again, huh? 10 years later, in a counselor's office, he's saying, why can't I keep my marriage? Why am I always failing on the job? Why aren't I ever measuring? Shame. Another book I read, Unwanted, I think everybody should read it. It's actually based on sexual brokenness and how our sexual brokenness is actually a view into where we can actually be delivered. Phenomenal book. But this one young lady, that they would go to church on Sunday, everything looked perfect in their family. Dressed the nicest. They're almost like the envy in the church. You know what I mean? Anybody know those kind of people? You know, it's like everything's perfect. But when they go home, Dad was verbally abusive. Mom turned the other way and abandoned her. And as she got older, she was left in a vulnerable position with a coach, found herself raped, and would go from one relationship to another. Out of this book, or actually out of Scary Mommy, off on that side, this one was psychological abuse. And it didn't start out that way, this one daughter writes. She said, it didn't start out bad. It just started out, Mommy's crying, Mommy's sad. You don't want to make Mommy sad, do you? Help Mommy, hug Mommy, love Mommy, stay with Mommy. We all know those sound good, but if said with the wrong, it can be used so much to manipulate, but then it degraded into manipulation, control, outbursts of anger, and became so unhealthy at 33 years old. She's saying, why do I feel the way I feel? She was mocked for her depression and anxiety from her mom. It drove her to feel numb and that she was a bother. And she felt totally isolated. You know the difference between guilt and shame? Guilt is I feel bad for something I've done. I messed up. I'm guilty. I need help. We've all been there. Shame is, I'm a bad person for what I've done. I see the difference. Shame says, I'm a bad person for what I've done or for what has been done to me, for who I am, and I am unworthy to be loved. In the Bible, we've got three very distinct examples of shame. One is the woman at the well, married 5 times. Jesus looked at her and said, the one you're living with now is not your husband. She had gone from one to another, and she was living in the shame of it. David and Bathsheba, when he was confronted by the prophet Nathan, David, you think your marriage started out on the wrong foot.
That's right.
He only took her against her will. She didn't have a choice. He was the king. Then he had her husband murdered, which she mourned over. And then she became his wife.
Right.
I've not yet met a marriage today that quite started off on that wrong of a foot.
Right.
And yet God turned it around.
He did.
He healed it. And Solomon came. But all the shame. And then the woman with the issue of blood. According to the law, she was unclean. An unclean woman, you couldn't even share the same seat with. She was declared unclean, couldn't be touched. She was living through life devoid of human touch. So when she touched Jesus' robe, he said, "Who touched me?" He could feel the power come out, but she knew the risk she took because touching him was a violation of the law. She lived in shame every day until Jesus healed her. Shame always drives us to hide from others. It drives us to isolate. And yet, at the same time then, it in turn makes us feel more shame. And it becomes this vicious cycle until we feel judged and then we feel contempt. Contempt is the act of despising, the state of mind of one who despises. Why do you think here in this church we have a motto, no perfect people allowed? Because we know every person that walks through that door has faced, at least to some degree, this right here. Are you hearing me this morning?
Yeah.
Is there anybody here that has no clue what I'm talking about and has not felt at all what I'm talking about this morning? I really want to know how you're doing it. This is why Jesus came. The song we sang, worship song, the redemption story of Jesus. Hebrews 12:2 says this, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. Yes. Despising our shame. This is Jesus. He took our shame. He took our sin. And when he looked at the shame, he despised it. You're not going to believe what the word means. In the Greek, the word means this: to look down upon, think poorly of, despise, abhor, detest, disdain, or loathe. It carries the idea of contempt. Shame always breeds contempt. And Jesus took yours and my shame for everything that we've done. For all that we feel that we are, whether it's somebody that has hurt us or something that we have done. And he purchased it. In 2 Corinthians 5:20, Paul says this, as his personal representatives, we say, make your peace with God, for God caused Christ, who knew nothing of sin, actually to be sin for our sakes, so that in Christ we may be made good with the goodness of God. God takes all of our shame, all of our hurts, all of our wounds. We reflect on the things that have happened in our life, whether we've been abused by someone, a father, a mother, a friend, a brother, a sister. And we go through life sometimes feeling that I'll never measure up. I'll never make it. It'll never work. And God says, yeah, in your own strength, you're probably right, but here's Jesus.
Amen.
And we started out with the love of mom and what that looks like. Where do you think she got that kind of love? Those pictures of love. Those pictures of empathy. Those pictures of comfort. Those pictures of it's the most endearing love we can imagine. And it's always from mom. I mean, and I don't take away from fathers at all, but there's just something about a mom's love. Does anybody know what I'm talking about this morning? I've asked that several times. I know. I just want to say there's just something about it. She got it from God. She got it from God. It's a gift. The church is messed up, folks. It's filled with messy people. Let me put it that way. And we invite every single one. If you've been in this church for any length of time, you've probably seen some of them. And if you're new, you will see some. Okay? You will. You'll see some people get upset. You'll see some people act inappropriately. You'll see some people post things on Facebook that are quite vile, quite frankly. And you know what we do? We love like mom. You see, the church is the bride of Christ.
That's correct.
Funny how it's the bride and not the groom. It's not modeled after a father or a man. Maybe it's because we're supposed to have the love like a mom. We're the bride of Christ. We love. How do we love? Oh, sometimes it's corrective. I get that. And we have to sometimes. But it's nurturing, it's nourishing, it's protective. It's filled with empathy. It's not judging. It's not critical. I don't want us as a church to be so wounded from the wounds of everything that we bring in here that we can't carry the healing of God to other people. Amen?
Yes, amen.
And as you come in here, I want this to be a healing place. And I know Pastor Rick is right there. He wants it to be a healing place. And we support that vision so that people's lives are changed, so that your life is changed, that my life is changed, that regardless of what we face, it could be adultery, it could be pornography, it could be drug addiction, it could be alcohol addiction, it could be just plain dysfunctional, codependent, messed up, controlling behavior. And this is the place. This is the place to be healed and whole. To be accepted, to be forgiven. The Bible says, love your enemies. Bless those that despitefully use you. When somebody brings their dysfunction into the church and into your life and into your home. You know what the hardest thing is? To love somebody that abuses you. That's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
But we're called to do it. God is likened unto a mom. Isaiah 66:13, as one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you, he says to the nation of Israel and to us today. You know, Satan wants to hurt every family, tear apart every family. He wants to tear apart the church. And if all of us can live from our hurts, he will thwart the plan of God, which is to show his love to everyone on the face of this earth,
That's right.
because we need it.
That's right.
Paul was so driven by it. Check this analogy out. This is a good one. My dear children, for who I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. He's like, I have such love for you. Now every mom in here, dads don't know this pain, not like moms do. We know it if we were in the birthing room, we have a slight indication of what it is because we probably cried next to our wives. But we don't know what that feels like. There's something about the love of a mom that goes through that, and the joy that she has when the baby's born, when the baby's put in her arms. It's precious, isn't it? And Paul says, I got this love for you. I just want Christ formed in you. I just want you healed. I just want you whole.
Right.
That all the wounds and everything that you've looked at that's been painfully forced upon your life, all those wounds, I just want you to know Christ. Some people have to work on Mother's Day. What can we say? Get as much as you can while you can. Amen. You see, what does this have to do with serving? This is a series of how can I serve you? Pastor Rick started off. Let me tell you how. This plays right into serving. Because you want to know something? I don't want you to serve here. I don't even want you to give here. I don't want you to come in through the door saying, okay, here we go, let's go to work. I know Rick doesn't want you to either. In the series on serving. Not if we don't know the love of Christ first. Because that's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. So I'm thinking about my message, and I'm walking up the hill this morning after I parked my car. And all those parking cones are left all over the place, strewn with tape, and they're knocked over. I look at them and I go, can't anybody pick these things up? I'm human, okay? Do you forgive me? Please? I begin to pick them up and drag them up to the building and straighten it up, and God says, what kind of attitude do you have about it this morning? Can somebody else preach, God? Why do you serve? Because nobody else is? Because you have to? Is it because you've been shamed into it? Church isn't to be shaming you into helping. I hope you never give out of shame. I hope you never serve out of shame. Oh, you're not a good Christian. God can't bless you unless, blah, blah, but that's all dysfunctional. We're amongst friends here, right? BS. That's what it is. What'd you say over there?
I said, say it.
Okay. I stopped short, but it was close. That's what it is. Because if we don't have the love of God on the inside of us, like Paul had, the love, that nurturing, reaching out. Because you want to know something? If my kids ever came to me, and I know my wife feels the same way, if her kids ever came, said, Mom, I need help, she'd be right there. Because there's something about it. And that's how we're supposed to be to the whole world. Now all of a sudden, picking up cones, no, I want this place to be the best. Because I don't want anything to hinder anybody from feeling the love of God. And if just a little bit of disorganization hinders, I'm here to make it the best. And you see the change of heart there? When you walk through the doors and say, how can I serve you? It's not about how can I love Jesus more? And let me flip it, because that almost has the wrong kind of implication. I have received the love of Christ so much. How can I not express it back? Because that's what it's about. He took my shame, all the abuse that's been bestowed, that I suffered, all the wounds that I've incurred. He took that, and he said, I love you, you're valuable, you're worth it. And Jesus died taking it. And who am I to carry it anymore? Paul writes this in Ephesians, one of my favorite passages in the Bible. Like you can say one's better than the other, because you can't. But it is still one of my favorites. In Ephesians 3:14. When I think of the greatness of this plan, I fall on my knees. This isn't like the little holy church thing. I get on my knees. He falls on his knees. He can't stand before the God of the Father, from whom all fatherhood, earthly or heavenly, derives its name. And I pray that out of the glorious richness of his resources, he will enable you to know the strength of the Spirit's inner reinforcement. The inside reinforcement. And we read at the beginning how you begin to question things because your insides are all tore apart and you don't feel like you measure up. Here's Paul saying that it's an inside reinforcement. That Christ may actually live in your hearts by faith. He lives there. We believe it. We trust it. And I pray that you, firmly fixed in love yourselves, may be able to grasp with all Christians how wide and deep and long and high is the love of Christ. You ever thought about how wide the love of Christ is? Anybody got an idea? As far as how far is that? Doesn't stop. How high is it? You know, in NASA right now, I got a nephew that works for NASA. I think it's so cool because I always thought that'd be cool. Go into space. They're launching a new telescope that's much more powerful than the Hubble. They're going to be able to see even further. Can I tell you something? It won't find the edge. How high, how deep is the love of Christ? And to know for yourself that love so far beyond our comprehension. Paul's whole desire. You know, and I just want you to work for God and come in here and do X, Y. This isn't what this says. He has one main thing that you know. It's the very love of God. The very love of God. How high, how deep, how big. Anything else is slavery. It is. Anything else is slavery. You know, the slaves of the Old Testament, they served for 6 years to pay off their debts. And as it got further and closer, you know, throughout history, that slave market where they were bought and traded, sold, and purchased, was the most heinous place ever. And it carries right into the New Testament and beyond. And they would serve 6 years. At the end of 6 years, by law, they were released to go free. By law. Unless something different happened. Because what would happen sometimes, the master, looking for a slave, would go down into the slave market. So there's somebody has to pay off their debts. And he would look at them with pity and love and compassion. And he would buy them from the slave market. And he would take them home and take care of them. Love them. Oh, they would work. But they would lavish on them a home. A place to be cared for. And you know what would happen at the end of the 6 years? The slave had a choice. He could go or stay. But if he chose to stay, he would put his head on a post and they would pierce his ear and put a hole in his ear. And he then changed from a slave to a bondservant for life. Paul said he was a servant of Christ. He used the Greek word bond servant. He chose to give his life to Christ. Because to him, the amount of love, the amount of grace that he experienced, he couldn't help but repay or to give, because there's no way to repay, to give his life completely over to God. To see how powerful love is. Love. This is what Jesus did for us. The word redemption we sang about, this is exactly the picture of the writers of the Greek New Testament had. That Jesus went down into that slave market. He found you and me. He says, I'm purchasing you out of it. And I'm going to give you freedom. And I'm going to give you life.
That's right.
I don't know why it's so hard for us to realize it's love. I tell you, something tells me it's similar to that of a mother. Nourishing, protective, comforting, empathetic, loving, caring, accepting, gracious. Anybody here need this morning? Let's pray. Father, we come before you. First of all, we thank you for your son, Jesus. Your son, Jesus, who took our shame, who cleansed us from all unrighteousness, from sin. God, we thank you. We give you our shame this morning, our wounds, our hurts, the things we've suffered. God, we bring it to you. The abuse. I bring it to you. If there's anybody here with your heads bowed and eyes closed that have never accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior, if there's anybody here at all, why don't you just slip up your hand? Is there anybody here that says, Pastor Dan, I want to know Jesus? Father, I thank you for your saving power, your healing power, and I thank you for your gift of mom and a mother's love. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey, Dan, we do a little something?
Possibly.
Alright. I think the group's small enough. I just felt like, kind of need to do a group huddle.
A group huddle.
Yeah. So if we could all come forward,
A
up to the front.
Okay. Sure, why not? Group huddle. Group hug. There's a flower for every mom out there when we're done. Just let me know. Group hug. Nobody left out that doesn't want to be.
Come on in.
And even if you want to be, we're going to try to convince you to be.